Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well. So, I wanted to pop in and talk about awakening and consciousness and how we can raise our level of consciousness. And one of the things that kind of suppose triggered me is something I wanted to talk about for a long time, but there's sometimes terms and things when I'm talking about this, I'm maybe not always as confident with talking about. I understand that on a, how could you say, a spiritual level, but sometimes explaining it is something I've always felt as if I maybe struggled with. But let's look at this. So I saw a post in a group that I'm in, and the woman asked, "What is fake spirituality?" And in some ways, it can be a loaded question, right? Because spirituality means different things to different people. But what I have noticed is that I buy a lot of products and they maybe say they're spiritual, particularly business products, or they're soul aligned. Then I buy them and there's nothing in it at all that's soul aligned or spiritual led. It's just a course that someone has added some spiritual words into to make it sound spiritual. But the reality is, I feel there's lack of depth, right? It's incongruent with what they're saying. It's not authentically from a spiritual perspective. And of course, we're all evolving, I'm evolving, and we're all at different levels of consciousness. And as we go along our journey, even some of the things that I do, I realise as I up level my level of consciousness, there's certain things that will change. And there's some areas when we're up level, we're better at than others. So I'm going to talk about consciousness first, because and why I'm talking about it. So one of the things that I suppose was quite surprised about, and maybe ways shocked over the last few years, was how many people couldn't sense, feel, and know that things weren't right, and didn't trust their intuition, and made certain decisions that then they regretted, or got caught in a situation where they completely ran with certain narratives, and maybe someone was still running with certain narratives without questioning anything. And it made me, and then I wondered how other people naturally, intuitively, just knew things and knew things weren't right and whatever. I remember a young niece said to me, she doesn't watch television, interestingly, but she said to me she felt at her core of her being that something wasn't right and that everything wasn't true that we were told. And that was someone, a young person, saying that it just didn't feel right and something feels really off, right? And I think a lot of us that are highly intuitive, highly empathic, and a certain level of consciousness instantly felt those things, right? So what is consciousness? I think in some ways consciousness is a level of awareness that you are not, for example, caught too much in your conditioning, right? You're not in the fight or flight response. You're not as easily triggered by everything. You are perhaps have a certain level of awakening. Now, if we look at the word awakening, awakening is a very loose term in the spiritual industry or the spiritual world. But the reality is there's different levels of awakening. So people can start their awakening journey. Does it mean they're awakened? Of course not, right? There's so many different levels to awakening, and it's to what we call a form of enlightenment, and being able to see things much clearer in the world and have also a detachment, and it's the detachment in a way to the ego drive to prove itself in a way, and a lot of other things, right? And as spiritual beings living a human experience, yes, at our core, we may all have a certain level of spirituality, but when we are functioning in the world, we all do have in different stages in life different levels of consciousness. Now, I've saw some spiritual teachers say that we're all at the same level and nobody else knows any more than anyone else. I have to disagree with that, because on my spiritual journey there was many people who tried to help me along the way. Some people I didn't understand what they were trying to teach me, because at that point in my life I wasn't at a level of consciousness. And I'm still learning, and there's still many, many people that are at a higher level of consciousness. I believe when we're saying those things, we're just being triggered by the fact that we've not got on to that next level yet, right? And we're maybe frustrated or whatever. On the awakening journey, there is different stages in the awakening journey, and you'll have all different types of spiritual teachers having different views on what that means, right? And many people will say that some people can have, most of us will go through the stages. Yes, there is few people who have bursts of awakening very quickly, and they go from a very low level of consciousness quickly to a higher level of consciousness, right? But for most of us, it's different layers, right? And I've never really met anyone that's went from one to the extreme, I suppose most of us haven't, because then we'd be completely or on the verge of complete enlightenment. But the reality is that one of the first stages, that when you start going on awakening and your level of consciousness is being raised up, is the dark night of the soul. And that is when people go through, I suppose it can be a very painful experience in some ways. I don't know if traumatic is the right word, but there's something moves within us, and it's a dark space. And often when people come out the dark night of the soul, it's like they've shed a new skin. They've broke off something that is around, and they're on that next part, and they start to see things from a different perspective, right? Now, I can honestly say that, yeah, I've had dark nights of the soul, but did I ever in my journey have this aha moment that was me spiritually awakened? No, because for me, I suppose it was a very gradual experience, and I did a lot of things, and I just didn't understand the word awakening. And a lot of us are, we don't see it as that, we don't understand it, and it's not. And it wasn't till even probably the last 3 years that I realised that there were so many things in my life that I was awakened to and conscious of as a very young age. But that was probably because of the extreme health challenges. And in some ways, I had to mentally and emotionally, and maybe not emotionally, maybe I didn't get that right, but in many ways mentally I moved out of the matrix of society because of my circumstances. I had to see things from a different perspective, because I realised on a soul level that the normal way of being was so unhealthy for me, and it was literally killing me, right? So my soul at some level, I suppose, chose to step out of the normal way of living. And through lots of different experiences and working with so many different healers and teachers, where I didn't know what it was, but I realised that they didn't have a certain level of consciousness. I didn't know what the word was, but I kept thinking, why? Have they no awareness? Have they no understanding? So, of course, but then I understand the spiritual teachers that tried to help me, and even spiritual friends that were really more conscious than me, trying to help me, but I didn't get it. Now, partly because I wasn't ready to for that level. I also was very conditioned, and we can be conditioned, we're all conditioned to different degrees. I was very conditioned by my religion. I was very conditioned by, also, as a lot of you will identify this, if you're an empath, I'm an empath and a highly sensitive person, and sometimes people think that the two are always together, and it's not the case. But as that, I spent most of my life being bombarded by other people's emotional, mental pain, and I can sense it in all different, and the physical pain, that on some level you had certain levels of awareness, but you also had shut off points, so you cut off certain things because I hadn't learned at that point how to harness my abilities, and I didn't also value the spiritual level of awareness and my gifts of what that gave me. I mean, sometimes it really helped me. It helped me in my therapy work because I would just know things about clients, but I wasn't honouring it, and I wasn't recognising that what I was given was this level of empathy and level of sensitivity gave me a, how could you say, an awareness and an insight that other people didn't have, right? Also, it came with trauma, which can lower your level of consciousness. So when you want to raise your level of consciousness, right, there's quite a few things that you need to consider, right? And first of all, I think one of the most important things is to be able to slow down and be more in the moment and get out of your head. Even if you're someone that is constantly trying to change your thoughts about something, right, that can actually come from a low level of consciousness. And bear with me, because if you're having to work at something all the time and you're always having to change your thoughts, now I'm not saying we all have certain things and thought patterns, I'm like everyone else, but what I mean is, if you find yourself wanting, that's all you want to do all day is just trying, I want to change my thoughts, I want to change my thoughts, what you're doing is you are so over attached to your thoughts that you get caught in a trap, where when you realise that your thoughts are only your thoughts, and it's just, and you can move your attachment and detach from that, right? You loosen your attachment, you're loosening the ego, right? And it's the ego, and it's the being unaware where your thoughts can drag your whole story and pull you in. That's what pulls us in. But it's the attachment to it. If we don't have attachment, the thoughts just wander off and they go away. So you have to bring in more, be able to practice more stillness in your life. And the more that you can get, that's one of the things why I'm so glad that I learned to meditate 30 years ago, and I became a meditation teacher as part of my work. And the ability to be still and really be in the moment, right? But not just be in the moment, also to be able to access deep, deep stages of stillness. Now, I use a technique, quantum entrainment, and it's really useful for getting into really deep, deep stillness, and it helps you access the 0 point. Now, the more time you spend in these states, you're away from the superficial and very distorted life, because what we're being part of in an everyday life, when we're caught in our thoughts and we're caught in other people's narratives, we're caught in a story of something that's not, it's not really in some way reality, or we've made it a reality, right? But it's not really coming from a power place, it's coming from a victim place, it's coming from not a spiritual place, it's coming just from fear, dogma, propaganda, it's coming from all sorts of things, right? And the more that you can move out of that, you recognise when it is dogma, when it is propaganda, you can feel the energy, right? And it's like when people are learning to develop their intuition, right? Some psychics only teach them how to develop the skills, but they don't teach them how to master stillness. And there's a big difference. When people learn how to master their stillness and access stillness, I believe that their level of consciousness moves up more naturally, because again they can loosen the ego. Because sometimes even when we're getting into psychic and spiritual development, people are so keen to connect with guides and connect with angels and connect to something else that they lose sight of, again, it's hard to explain, but it's like the ego, because again that can be spiritual ego, right? It can be like just to feel special that we're grabbing onto things, right? When we're not trusting actually even ourselves when we're sometimes just going for other things. Of course, the more stronger your spiritual connect is to a high light being, the better. But the reality is, at our core, we should just feel things and know things. Often things when things are not vibrating at a good level and an honest level, right? But the more that you practice stillness, also practice your discernment. Discernment muscles are so important in the spiritual world and the physical world at the moment. To be able to discern when something doesn't feel off, when to discern that what you're being told is not always the truth, even from people who think they have your best interest at heart. And I'll give you examples. So, I'm someone that has invested in a lot of things, and I have an interest in a lot of things, and I've had a lot of Akashic record readings through the years, but I've also trained myself in quite a few Akashic training schools. And I've had different energy readings and all sorts of things. And I'll be honest, a lot of them just didn't resonate. It didn't resonate. And sometimes I was getting this thing, a whole load. It was like almost, this was so wrong. And what I realised was that we have to be very careful as individuals that we never give our power over to someone else. Sometimes, yes, I've had some amazing readings and some things that people really were spot on and helped me. But also, we're all human, and we can also, when we're doing things, come from the ego. And it can be the ego that's coming through rather than really something else. And also, there can be lower level guides. That's reality. People can sometimes think they're tapping into high level, high vibrational guides, and it's not always the case. I've had some weird experiences with people. And the more that you raise your own level of consciousness, you don't really need anyone else, because you have a certain trust and a certain level of insight, and you're often, you're getting higher up than those people that are want to give you help and advice. And it helps you make better decisions. Now, one of the ways that we lower our level of consciousness is being distracted, right? And looking for things to occupy the mind and to stop us switching off and relaxing, especially things that are low level, like watching the telly. Most of the films that we watch today and most TV is actually very low vibration, but not high vibration, right? And a lot of the things and hobbies that people can get stuck into, even just sitting scrolling through Facebook or Twitter, whatever, they are actually lower dense vibrational things, right? So the more time that we do things, or we invest in unhealthy habits, doing things that are really low vibrational, alcohol, smoking, maybe drugs that are, whatever, or even overeating, right? Or eating the wrong things, processed food, low density, low vibrational foods, and even worse, things that are not really, they were created in a lab that we eat, right? These all things can lower our consciousness. And it's one of the reasons why, and I know I can trigger people about this, but if I'm going to a healer or a certain things, I usually look for somebody that has a certain level of consciousness and they make certain decisions every day to try and uplift their vibration. Now, they don't need to be a saint, that's not what it is. But obviously some was consciously myself who is consciously always trying to raise my vibration, right? And of course I have areas in my life that I'm vulnerable about and that maybe not my strength. But I'm not going to go to a healer and go for a spiritual teacher that is not, that has a lower consciousness level or is not looking after their health or well or not doing things to raise their vibration. Now, of course, we're all in different stages of the journey, and you cannot run before you walk or crawl, right? And there's steps. One of the things that is happening at the moment, because everything that's went on during the last few years, is that people are waking up very fast to things, right? That a lot of us in the healing sector that have been at 20 or 30 years have took maybe gradually over a lot of time to become aware of. People are being pivoted into certain levels of awakening, and it's a shock to the system, right? And part of it can push people into cognitive dissonance and step back and want to run away, right? Or want to hide, or want to deny what goes on. And the reality is, as healers and spiritual workers, we are there to help people with their awakening. But if we are not willing to raise our level of consciousness, or we're not even aware of what a level of consciousness is, we maybe don't know who our ideal client is to help. But the reality is, a light worker, that is what you're here to do. Light workers are about shining the light, but it's about having a high level of consciousness, right? So if you're not using your intuition, and you do not have a level of consciousness that you're not aware what's going on about, and you cannot sense, you have to look at why. What is it in your life that is keeping you at a lower level of consciousness? What is keeping you trapped? Is it fear? Is it denial? Is it not facing the shadow aspect? Do you want to do all the light work but don't want to take self-responsibility? Are you choosing to be in victim mode, right? We all need to, when we go on this journey, we all need as much help and support, because it's not easy. It's not easy. I'm lucky I have quite a few really good friends that are spiritual friends. I didn't have that 20 years ago, and it was very, very lonely, right? I have that now. And many people that are in this group I also call spiritual friends, right? And one of the things that we can do to support each other with raising our awareness and our consciousness and our awakening is to be honest, to be compassionate, to help and support others, and to be united as light workers, right? And not see this work as competition, right? And also see that if we truly want to be a light worker in a spiritual business, that we start working in a more spiritual way instead of the egoic way. Now, we all have areas, I still work on it, right? But if you truly want to be a light worker, right, you have to face the shadow. You have to face it. You have to do the shadow work. And it's not just about, I think there's two sides. Some people think they can do all the shadow work yourself, and I disagree, because you don't see your blind spots. I invest highly in other people, right? But also, of course, you have to do some of it yourself. You can't get somebody else to help with you all, right? So, but this is, while you're in groups like this, there also can be opportunities to exchange with other people, because when we're raising a level of consciousness, of course it can be high investment, but and we'll put a post up again like this. We've put it before, where if you would like to have some sort of exchange, but you have to respect that there'll be different types of values in exchange. Someone that's maybe just starting out, and someone that's maybe 20 or 30 years, and the level of investment might be completely different. But I think, it's really important that we do the work and we invest in the tools. The way, when you raise your level of awareness and consciousness, material things become less important, right? You do not hang on to the material things. Your spirituality is the most important thing, and you make it the most important thing, right? And I think this is something that people have to hear, because sometimes this, and also when you're no matter, when you're in a more conscious state, no matter what your financial situation is, you move, you don't talk as much in fear. You're not coming from as much of the victim mentality, right? I've been in many situations where I've had no money, and I've just said, right, what can I do? Right, what can I do? It's all about just, right, okay, come on, there's more coming in. It's about changing your perspective. But if you choose to be in victim mode all the time, and you choose to be the person that just sits back and goes, oh no, I can't do anything to change this, you're lowering your level of consciousness, right? You're not vibrating at high level. Whatever is life is throwing you at present moment, it's a gift. It's a gift. And David Rabone always used to mean it's a gift, Eileen. It's a gift. No matter how hard your life is at the moment, no matter how shocking the revelations that you are making at the moment about what really is going on in the world, right? We can turn this around. We are light workers and we're here to change it, but we have to start looking at the dark within ourselves and being able to face the darkest things that are going on inside and be able to take the time when we need it, take the self-care when we need it. But I was going to mention some other things to raise your awareness. So obviously, you have to be able to face the shadow, do the work, the inner child work, whatever. But again, get the right help if you need to, right? You need to be able to still. You have to be able to harness your intuition, and you have to be also, but I'm not saying have to be, but it's like you need to get more in the flow with your purpose and more in the flow with you and really understand what you're really here to do and be less distracted by everybody else. See, even understanding who your ideal clients or your soul clients can help your awakening because you understand your path. But often I get people and they just make this big description and it's so wide and so broad that you can sense they're not really knowing who they really are and they're not really zooming in their strengths, right? So even knowing your zone of genius and your strengths is a different part of your awakening. But also part of our awakening is that detachment that it's, even though we believe our business is important, it's still just one part of the equation. And if we've too much attachment to a business, that's fear, that's lack, that's coming from low vibration. And it's about surrendering. Another way you can raise your consciousness as the ability to detach and to surrender to God, to surrender to Spirit to guide you, right? When you start to try and control everything and you you find yourself, everything has to be, and it has to be this way, and it has to be, then that again is a lower level of consciousness. Okay, let's see if there's any messages anybody's sleeping on this morning. Good morning, Tanya, no worry. Okay, so it's so important that we give ourselves time and that we be kind and compassionate ourselves. And no matter where we're on the road of awakening, that's where it's like everything, we have to start somewhere, right? And one of the aspects of opening and awakening is being able to be open. I shut myself off to certain levels of awakening many years ago because I thought people were crazy. I really did. And I had such, even though I was highly empathic and sensitive to certain things, certain things I just felt too much for me to handle. And this is what people are having at the moment. And what's being revealed and what's going on in other countries is all part of the bigger awakening, because it's to really waken humanity up to see things from a completely different perspective. But if you're someone that just doesn't want to see and only wants to see a safe narrative, and if you find yourself only want to fit into what feels comfortable and what you've done and the habits and only trust the things that you've always trusted, right? Then you're going to find it hard to level and awaken, and you're going to find it hard to raise your level of consciousness. Okay? Have a beautiful day, everyone. I wish you well, and that's just 10 o'clock on the dot. Bye-bye, everyone.